Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session on helping the helpers, tech strategies to support community justice partners. Our presenters today are Liz Keith, Brooke Doyle, and Dr. Audrey Barbakoff. Liz is the program director at Pro Bono Net and has played a key role in Pro Bono Net's program strategy for more than a decade. She joined Pro Bono Net as a law help circuit rider, working with legal aid programs in 25 states to build online resources to increase access to legal help for low-income communities. As program director, Liz now manages strategic initiatives and programs at Pro Bono Net that equip individuals and communities with new tools to tackle civil justice problems. Brooke Doyle is the Senior Project Coordinator at Web Junction. Brooke joined the Web Junction team in 2017 to work on supercharged story times for all. Brooke's expertise in curriculum development and grant management serve her well at Web Junction, where her latest projects include creating pathways to civil legal justice and the related eviction resources. Dr. Audrey Barbakoff is the CEO of Co-Lab Capacity, where she partners with libraries and social good organizations to design solutions and plans that expand community relationships to create a benefit that lasts well beyond the end of any single project. So thank you for joining us today, and take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathy, and welcome everyone. We are really delighted to have you with us today, and many thanks to the Florida Department of Elder Affairs, Legal Services of Greater Miami, Florida Health Justice Project, and Florida Legal Services for hosting this session. We're really grateful for the opportunity to be with all of you and discuss this topic today. As Kathy mentioned, I'm Liz Keith, Program Director at Pro Bono Net, and we are a national nonprofit that works to bring the power of the law to all through innovative uses of technology and strengthening collaboration in the civil justice sector. And I'm really honored to be joined today by of the two co-presenters that Kathy mentioned, who each bring a different, but I think equally powerful perspective to today's topics. Audrey and Brooke both have particular expertise in developing partnerships with public libraries to support access to community resources and services, but also are going to bring a perspective, I think a unique perspective to this discussion today about digital inclusion and the experience of public libraries in the past and present on what digital inclusion looks like and how libraries can be partners and also models for how we think about digital inclusion in supporting older adults in accessing legal services and online resources. So thank you so much, Audrey and Brooke, for your willingness to participate today. I'm really grateful for it. So I just wanted to confirm everybody can see my slides and the session roadmap. Okay, great. So we're going to start off this session today with some framing for this topic and how we might think about community justice partnerships to serve older adults, why collaborations between legal services organizations serving older adults and community-based organizations and public libraries is so critical. A framework for thinking about the role of technology and training and supporting those partnerships. And then we'll shift to talk about the intersection of elder justice and digital inclusion, and also how public libraries can be key partners as on-ramps and anchor institutions for helping older adults access online resources, and also doing capacity building within public libraries to help librarians guide and support older adults in accessing online legal resources and services. So I think the first couple of stats here that I'm sharing probably won't be a surprise to anybody in this session, but I think they're important to frame. as we look across the national access to justice landscape, there are stats from the National Center for Access to Justice, which does research in this area, but also has been a leader in bringing voices from beyond the legal profession into discussions about how to expand access to justice. And they found that as of 2020, the reality of access to a civil legal aid attorney in the US is in more than half of states. There's fewer than one civil legal aid attorney per 10,000 people living on a low income. And there's about 10,000 legal aid attorneys total in the US. So this community, the civil justice community in Florida and beyond, does incredible work. But we know that justice is still either inaccessible or unavailable to millions, particularly people who might be living on the economic margins, might be socially isolated, or who face geographic mobility or language barriers to accessing that help. We also know that there's some people who may experience a stigma in reaching out to an attorney for assistance. We certainly see this among older adults in some cases, or people that maybe had an experience with the justice system that led them to feel it's a tool to be used against them, not something that they can use to advocate on their own behalf. And then we know that when older adults need help with issues that impact their basic needs and rights, they often need that help urgently. And often because of that, we'll turn to frontline groups or professionals or community organizations that they're interacting with on a day-to-day basis that they already know and trust. To just paint a little bit of a richer picture here, the Legal Services Corporation recently came out with an updated Justice Gap report that has a segment specifically looking at the unmet legal needs of older adults. And if you haven't seen this, there's some really interesting data here. They found that about 70% of low-income senior households had at least one civil legal problem in the last year. In more than a third of those households, they had 5 or more problems in the last year, and 14% had 10 or more problems. The most common problem areas were consumer issues, healthcare, and income maintenance. I think a lot of these trends are aligned with needs that may have been compounded or made more challenging because of the social and economic impact of the pandemic on older adults. In terms of help seeking for these issues, the report found that older adults sought legal help for about a quarter of their problems. But in upwards of 90%, they reported that they did not receive any or enough help for those issues. So there's more data in this report about older adults, their confidence in their ability to access an attorney and work with an attorney for their issues. But I think the headline here is that there were seeing a lot of unmet legal needs, and also legal needs that intersect with everyday legal issues that might not always be identified or surface as a legal need, but that people might think about as just a personal financial issue or a personal or family issue that they might not recognize as a legal issue. So in combining the sort of unmet legal needs with the digital divide, there's some updated data that helps give us a sense of, at a high level, what kinds of barriers older adults might face in accessing online legal resources and services. We know that the pandemic kind of supercharged our reliance on the internet and on online tools. And even though that might be receding a bit now, we just, I think, have seen and anticipate that there will be a lot of ongoing services and reliance on online systems and access points moving into the future. But a landmark report that came out in early 2021 that was produced by Oates and the Humana Foundation found that about 22 million Americans over age 65 do not have broadband at home. So that's about 42% of older adults, compared with under 30% of younger adults are lacking access to broadband. When we look at other ways that older adults might be getting online, one of the primary ways might be through a smartphone. And the Pew Internet in American Life project did a survey of adults around the same time in early 2021 that found that 65% of individuals 92% of individuals 65 and older own a cell phone, but only about 61% of those have a smartphone. So that leaves a gap of about 30% who are mobile connected in some way, but don't necessarily have a smartphone to take advantage of all of the navigation and engagement that those devices require. The OATS broadband study also found that connectivity gaps intersect with other factors, and the two strongest predictors of access to broadband were low educational attainment, so less than a high school degree, and an income below $25,000 a year. But race and health status were significant factors as well in who has access to broadband. We also know that access can vary widely based on a region's telecom infrastructure or be limited by economic opportunity or affordability. And this study ranks states along those lines. So, where is a state in terms of affordability of broadband access? And I think Florida is actually doing pretty well here. It was in, the top 10% of states on the chart. But what that looks like can vary widely by county or by region or by people who are in a rural area. So we see here that lack of access can compound barriers that older adults with limited financial resources can face in a wide range of areas, including accessing essential government services or social services, telehealth services, and more. So in this session today, we're going to explore how we can partner with and grow and integrate the expertise of allied professionals, professions outside of the legal system, to help address these challenges, the twofold challenges that we're talking about in terms of the unmet legal needs of older adults and also the challenges that older adults often experience in accessing or fully engaging with online resources. We know that these allied professionals, these helpers already exist. Many of them are serving older adults in everyday community-based settings, but the challenge is that many of them lack information, tools, support, and power sometimes to help people in an efficient and effective manner. So, but as we look across here and think about social service providers, librarians, and others in particular, they're trained at giving good referrals and at helping to identify when other experts are needed to help somebody. They also work in highly connected centers and in communities that are grounded in the social context of their clients' lives. So we'll be looking here at how we deepen our partnerships and work with these communities and the role that technology and training can play in that. So I think specifically in thinking about how training, support, and targeted technology can help activate the kinds of networks we saw on that previous slide, we will be highlighting some examples of how technology and training can help codify and share legal expertise in settings where trained professionals can help notice and assist people with basic information, basic legal problems or referrals. We also will touch on how technology and training can help meet individuals with legal issues earlier in their time of need. And then, as you think about this session here, I would encourage you to also think about how some of these examples can help also create over time community-based feedback loops or advocacy strategies to help address, tackle, broader injustices or provide tools that amplify the voices of older adults on justice issues. One of my favorite examples and own personal sources of inspiration in this space actually comes from outside the US, from Community Legal Education Ontario. And they've been a longtime leader in the research and practice of community justice help. And their latest report was released in 2020 by Julie Matthews, the executive director of CLEO, and Professor David Wiseman at the University of Ottawa Faculty of Law. And Brooke and I had an opportunity to present at a conference earlier this year with Julie Matthews. And what she and CLEO set forth is a new approach for thinking about supporting and enabling community justice partners to provide assistance for people's life-affecting legal problems based on the realities of how people are already seeking help from them. And CLEO proposes a support and equip framework that essentially to taking this approach, a support and equip approach to supporting and enabling work by community justice organizations and partners when the three features you see at right are present. When those organizations have or can develop the knowledge, skills, and experience to provide that assistance, when that assistance is being provided within a nonprofit organization and an ethical infrastructure, which of course we would see in public libraries or in community-based nonprofit social service organizations, and where those individuals are already providing some form of holistic support to people seeking assistance with legal needs. So I think this is just a really thoughtful framework for thinking about how to expand partnerships with community-based organizations. And I would invite our attendees today to listen to this topic with this framework in mind and to imagine the community justice ecosystem that you want to see in years to come to serve older adults, the technology and training programs that you'd like to see supporting that, and what steps might you take or begin this year to help nurture that vision, and who are the types of community partners that you would want to start or deepen conversations with. So a couple of specific notes here on a more tactical level. I wanted to highlight some steps and resources in the nearer term to get thinking about this and be aware of this. We know that digital divide and digital access is an issue for many low income or individuals living on low wealth or low incomes. And there's been efforts over the last couple of years under the current administration to expand access to affordable high-speed internet. And there was an announcement, I think 2 weeks ago, of an expanded federal partnership with major internet service providers to further reduce the costs and or increase high-speed access for households that are eligible for the Affordable Connectivity Program. So the most recent updates about this are available on getinternet.gov and the FCC's site. And this is a great program to publicize to older adults if you're not already aware of this, or helping to get the word out about this. In terms of that support and equip framework that we touched on earlier, some of the other ways that we've seen training and technology help build knowledge and skills among community justice partners include webinars on hot topic legal issues that frontline workers and community-based organizations might be hearing about and see coming through their doors. Another possibility to think about our skill building webinars on topics such as detecting legal problems, checking the reliability of legal information, understanding referral options for legal services, and navigating online resources to find legal information and referrals. The program that I was referring to earlier in Ontario, CLIO, has created a whole sort of curriculum around this that is focusing on capacity building for community organizations in these areas and strengthening partnerships between those organizations and their legal services community to assist in these areas. They've also taken these trainings and converted them into tip sheets to help community-based organizations detect legal problems and provide legal information, and to be able to do that in a way where they're comfortable that they're on the legal information side of what's being provided rather than legal advice. So on the left is an example, just I think a really thoughtful example of a tip sheet they created to help community-based organizations understand, when they hear a term like I can't afford my car payments, or I felt pressured to buy something from a door-to-door salesperson, that that might be intersecting with a legal issue. And if so, what are the kinds of documents that somebody might bring or surface in that meeting or that setting that also might be a tip? Hey, there might be a legal issue here, or an issue with a legal remedy. And then within this tip sheet, they've also linked back to the relevant resources on their province-wide legal information website to help that community worker quickly access that information, or the organization that's best to refer them to. And then on the right, you can see this just nice, simple guide. This is several more pages, but this is just the beginning of it, that helps educate the community worker about the difference between legal information and legal advice, and guidance on how to feel comfortable staying on the legal information side of that. So these are great resources, I think, that are both nice sources of information, and also resources that potentially could be adapted by programs in the Florida justice community. And of course, here in Florida, the legal risk detector also is a model for helping to support and equip community justice partners with a tool to conduct a legal health checkup. And a tool that supports professionals in aging to screen the homebound, disabled, or isolated elderly for common legal issues and refer them to a partnering legal services program. So the risk detector takes some of those same concepts that you saw in those fact sheets from CLIO, but integrates those into a dynamic, interactive web-based app that can be used by professionals in aging from a wide range of community and homes or phone service environments. So when we think about community collaborations for digital inclusion, which we're going to go deeper into in our next segments with Audrey and Brooke, I wanted to just highlight a few things that we think about at Pro Bono Net. All of our work is really centered on developing community-centered technology to help individuals better understand and address their legal needs, and to strengthen the work of advocates supporting them. But we know that our tools don't serve everybody, or don't serve everybody equally well. So we think about this in our work, and try to be reflective on this in our work, and in our work with community-based organizations, to understand who are we not reaching, and where can we co-design better outreach or access or service delivery strategies to better serve individuals we're not reaching. And this slide, I think, provides one example of this from direct feedback that we've heard from users of one of our systems. These are this is verbatim feedback from a survey that we've done of partners, end users of one of our systems that helps individuals. It's called Law Help Interactive, and it helps individuals who are need to complete an online legal form or a court document, but if they're doing that without a lawyer, to be able to do that in a free, more user-friendly way on their own. And on the left, we have incredible feedback. I mean, the type of feedback that you see on the left, we got hundreds of these types of responses in the last year. I mean, really incredible positive responses from people with a wide range of technology fluency and backgrounds about their experience using the tool. You know, somebody saying they're not computer savvy, or they were this was an incredible stress reliever, and they had no experience in this process, but this tool and these guided interviews helped give them comfort and hope in getting through this phase of their process. So, incredible feedback that we're really heartened by. But then we did get, it was, relatively small percentage of feedback, but we did get feedback, as you might expect, from people who had trouble using the system. So, somebody who was overwhelmed, somebody that was unclear, do I have to print this? How do I get this form off of my local computer? Or, it would be really nice if I could have just chatted with somebody along the way in this process. So we think about these issues on the right kind of as we take this feedback and think about how can we better support people that need more comprehensive support when navigating online services, or how can we build better processes to help people with the last mile of their experience using an online system. And we look at this on the individual level through that kind of survey feedback, but then we also try to go beyond general website usage statistics, and ask in our surveys and ask and capture data in our analytics where we can, to go a little bit deeper to understand, who are we not currently serving, or who we're not serving equally well with our online systems. So these are some of the data points that we try to capture, where possible, or qualitative feedback to help us understand that. So if you're doing surveys of online systems or gathering user feedback, and you're not already asking about what device somebody's using, or how do they experience the quality of their internet speed, do they have the ability to print documents or edit documents? Those might be good things to consider asking to help identify where there might be sort of gaps in people's experience. These are also some suggestions of what you might consider asking older adults to help gauge their comfort and preferences in using technology. What's the best way for me to get in contact with you? What kinds of tasks are you comfortable doing on a computer? What's your preferred way to learn about using this particular service? And then I just wanted to close out here with a framework that I came across recently that I think is really powerful, and I hope to be able to apply in deeper ways in our work at Pro Bono Net, but also would love to hear feedback on and kind of see if this resonates with the elder justice field. Researchers from the schools of engineering and design at Purdue and the University of Texas recently put forward a framework that helps designers of any kind of system consider the often unarticulated user needs of dignity, empowerment, and security in a more intentional manner, and in a way that does not leave this to chance. And they took this framework and this framework that they call compassionate design, and applied it in areas like the design of a prosthetic limb, or an MRI for kids, or a wheelchair to be used in areas with unpaved or bumpy roads. And the framework that they created, I think, asks a really interesting and important set of questions about design decisions. So, does the design of this resource or this tool help make the person feel more included? Does it affect their social status? Does it make them feel more control in their situation, or more or less confident? Does it affect their sense of assurance that everything is safe? I think these are really interesting questions for us to think about in the elder justice context. And if we're designing new legal rights content, or designing new programs with community-based partners, how the design of those services can help impact the an older adult sense of dignity, empowerment, and security in those services. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Audrey, who is going to take us through a framework for thinking about elder justice and digital inclusion, and ways to think about partnering, particularly with libraries in this context. And as Kathy said in the beginning, we welcome your questions and your feedback. If any of this resonates with you or does not resonate with your experience, we welcome that as we go. So thank you, Audrey.
Thank you so much, Liz. And there's so much of what you just said that is going to be reflected back in similar ways here, right? Like there are these really clear and interesting through threads that I will try to point to when I can. So I'd like to speak a little bit. So in my background, I've done worked in public libraries, and then also provided consulting services for both libraries and outside organizations. And a lot of my work has had a focus on digital equity as well as on older adults. And through that, I have seen a lot of examples of partnerships and frameworks that that can recognize some of those more sensitive, like speaking to that compassionate design framework. Seen a lot of the underlying issues that that sometimes cause solutions to fail, or the often small changes we can make that cause solutions to be more successful. So I'm excited to share some of those with you. And next slide, please. I want to begin by providing a framework for digital equity and digital inclusion. So these are terms that we've already been using throughout this presentation. And Liz spoke to many of the elements that live within this, right? Broadband access, and not just do you have a connection, but is that connection of adequate speed, strength, reliability for whatever it is that you need to do, right? Device access, digital literacy, so you comfort of sort of the emotional piece of, do you feel confident? So we're going to bring those together into a digital equity framework. Next slide. So these definitions come from NDIA, which is the National Digital Inclusion Association. I assume that doesn't sound right. I'll have to double check. Oh, it's right in front of my
Alliance.
National Digital Inclusion Alliance. Goodness gracious. I say NDIA so often that I lose track of what it stands for. So during the pandemic especially, NDIA really took a nationally leading role in creating some shared language around digital equity and inclusion, and also creating some replicable models that could be used in a variety of settings with partners. So digital equity is a condition in which all individuals and communities have the information technology capacity needed for full participation in our society, democracy, and economy. So this is a big idea. If the digital divide, as Liz mentioned, is the issue that some folks are facing, then digital equity is the goal, right? It is the state that we want to reach. It is the big vision of what our communities would be if everyone in them had full and unfettered access to all of the infrastructure, technology, and know-how and confidence that they needed to accomplish whatever it was that they were hoping to do in a virtual space. So imagine the difference that would make for your clients if they all had that. So the purpose of this idea of digital equity is to take us away from a problem-focused mindset of the digital divide, a very persistent problem, right, where we've sort of just, it can feel in some ways as though we've sort of been banging our heads against it for many, many years. And instead to say, rather than running away from something, let's determine what the endpoint is, what it is that we're trying to move to, and then work together to build towards that. So it allows for a much more targeted and strategic set of solutions. Next slide, please. digital inclusion is the roadmap. So we have this big thorny problem of the digital divide, and we have this big ideal of a digitally equitable future. Digital inclusion is the roadmap between them. And there are pillars of digital inclusion, specific sort of strategies or actions, tactics that organizations can utilize in order to improve digital inclusion and thereby move us closer to a digitally equitable future. NDIA has since added a couple more pillars related more to systems and society, kind of like supportive organizations, accessibility on the web. But the initial three, and that are very core to our focus here today, are access to broadband, access to devices, and digital literacy. So these are all things that we can get our heads around, right? That we can take specific actions to move the needle in each of these three ways, thereby moving us towards greater digital equity. So when we talk about the partnerships and the initiatives that that libraries and other community partners and nonprofit and public partners might have with legal agencies and social service agencies, this is the framework in which we are operating, is in an attempt to ideally holistically, not in three separate buckets, but in one united way, to advance these three things. Next slide, please. So why partner with your library here? I'm going to talk about multiple kinds of partners, but each of the examples that I will give you does include a library as a partner. And this is because libraries are the local digital inclusion champions in your community. And Brooke will speak more to this. But I do want to highlight that libraries have been doing this work, often in particular with elders, and specifically often the most vulnerable elders, really since the 90s. That as soon as people realized that there's this newfangled thing called the internet had come around, and it was a way to get access to information and to expertise and to support, people immediately started turning to their libraries to help them learn how to navigate this. And when they were unable to access or navigate it, turning to their librarians to help them as a proxy. And the Gates Foundation especially was really instrumental in getting computers and internet connections into libraries very early on all across the country. So libraries have played this anchor point for the elders in your community for a long time. When they run into a digital related issue, their library, their librarian is often where they turn first, because it's where they've been turning for a very long time. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about some specific models, some service models, all based around the idea of this place-based, local, meeting people where they are. So library is where your clients are now. It is where they're turning often for their legal questions or concerns, as well as their digital issues. So by partnering with your library and with others in the community, you can reach people in a really holistic and meaningful way. Next slide. So the first model I'm going to talk about is digital navigators. And the reason I want to start here, this is the primary model pioneered by NDIA, initially as a pandemic response, but clearly with legs far beyond the pandemic. And so libraries are not the only places that have started to adopt a digital navigator model. This is a rapidly growing national movement. So some states have started to adopt digital navigator programs at the statewide level. Often libraries are partners, but other types of organizations and public agencies also offer digital navigator service. So if this is something that you have not yet seen in your community, you are very likely to see it in the not too distant future, because it is quickly becoming and it's easily replicable, so it's quickly becoming a national trend. So what are digital navigators? Essentially, digital navigators are people, either staff or volunteers or community partners, who provide one-on-one appointments for technology help and access. And the key to a digital navigator model is, Liz, you mentioned that part of that CLIO model is holistic support. That this is meant to be a very holistic model. So a digital navigator helps with digital literacy, as well as getting folks permanent access to in-home broadband and to devices. So all three of those pillars of the digital inclusion stool, all three of those legs, are all included here. Additionally, Liz, I was struck by looking at the feedback that you had received on your services on how much that feedback was driven by emotion. Right, there's the knowledge piece, and we often talk about, right, do people know how to do this, or the access piece, right? Do they have the tools that they need? But a really core piece of digital navigation of any kind for people is emotional, right? Do people feel confident? Do people worry that they look stupid, right? That is a really common thing that we see in the libraries. This makes me feel dumb, and so I don't want to do it, right? Or people feel very overwhelmed. So a digital navigator is a human being, right, who sits down with you and has a one-on-one, person-to-person, human-to-human connection, and can take you through things a little bit step by step at your own pace, right, at the client's pace. And so that alone, giving people the emotional support as they walk through these processes is immensely valuable and allows people to persevere through some of the early hurdles that might have stopped them before. So the goal of a model like this is that elders can afford and confidently access the internet to achieve their goals. So to give you an example of how this might play out in a legal area, you might have someone come to a digital navigator, potentially, let's say that this is a digital navigator at their library, and say, I'm having a problem with my landlord, right? And they said that I need to, I need to fill out, I tried to get help from someone and they said I need to go online and fill out this application, right, for legal aid, or I need to go online and fill out this form, or, right, I have to get some documentation of my lease, right? I have to go and find it in my email that I haven't opened in 5 years, and I don't remember the password, and I have to print it out, and I'm not sure how to do that, right? And then I have to upload it to this website. So, someone might come with what presents as a technology problem, but related to a legal issue. And what that digital navigator will do is help them with the basic digital skills. So, okay, how do you get back into your email? How do you reset your password? How do you print a document, right? We'll also address the information need, right? Recognizing, hey, I hear this is a trained reference librarian in many cases. So I'm hearing that there's a legal issue here. You may not have asked me about that directly initially, but did you know that we have a legal aid clinic coming up next Thursday, right? Or did you know, that there's someone in the community who helps with this and here's their phone number. So recognizing that need. And then also saying, hey, for ongoing needs related to this, right? This is something where, maybe if someone especially is involved in some kind of litigation, there's going to be some ongoing needs. Getting them set up in such a way that they also are able to navigate things on their own from home. Maybe they're trying to do all of this from a smartphone only, right? Well, let's see if we can get them a laptop, right? So that they're able to, have those video appointments with legal aid, for example. Community partners here. So NDIA itself is a really wonderful partner. When I launched the first Digital Navigators program in a library in Washington State, we partnered directly with NDIA. They've also created a really large number of wonderful now toolkits that allow anyone to get started with this, the library or other agency. So they themselves are wonderful partners. Your local library is also a wonderful partner. They likely have heard of this model and might be interested in setting it up, especially if they know that they have an interested partner in the community. But again, other agencies are also using digital navigator models, also often at the state level. So your state or local government might also have a role to play here. Next slide, please. Excellent. So another service model that I'd like to talk about is telehealth. There's been a rapid expansion of telehealth in libraries, but the reason that I raise this here is not only for the health implications, which might be of interest to some of you, but because this model is extremely adaptable to the legal field. The library that I worked at that launched a telehealth type of program, the initial intention of that program was actually for it to be more around social services, including things like one-to-one legal counsel, right, or drop-in times with a virtual virtual legal help. But essentially, what a telehealth model is a virtual meeting service. Right? And so that can be applied to really any kind of social service or legal aid or helping context. It allows people to access expert help online without barriers, right? That's really the fundamental goal. So the way this might work in a library is that the library would provide the technology, and they could work with you in many cases to identify what is the appropriate technology for, say, if in the pre-pandemic times you might have run a drop-in clinic, right, where people could come and get help, or held individual appointments, 30-minute free consultations with folks. This can all be done virtually. And even now that we are able to meet again in person in many cases, going back, Liz, to I think one of your very first slides, you highlighted the limited number of legal aid attorneys available in pretty much any area, even the best equipped ones. And certainly I think when you get into rural and tribal areas, that's going to look even more dismal. So if you don't have anyone locally, this kind of model, a virtual model, allows you to easily to connect people with aid from anywhere else in the state. So it can really help with equity in terms of those geographically hard to reach and hard to serve areas. So some partnerships here could be with your bar association, your legal aid nonprofits, other wraparound social service providers. The library would provide the technology, a semi-private space. Most libraries have meeting rooms of some kind, often bookable by the public. And then library staff who are present to help with and mediate the technology piece. And that's really key. So when we launched a telehealth model at the library where I was working, we set it up in such a way that there was no technology interaction whatsoever for the client. They came into the meeting room and we had already launched their meeting on the screen. So they did not even need to have an email. We found a way to circumvent all of that. There are different ways that you can handle that, but at the very least, the library staff is there to help people with that kind of initial hurdle of just getting signed in, right? Getting set up. If people run into a technology problem partway through, there's someone on hand to help out. Next slide, please. Another model is that became extremely popular during the pandemic, but that might fade out to some extent over the next few years, we'll see, is circulating technology. So this is primarily mobile hotspots and laptops or tablets. And these might be loaned to individuals, just like a book might circulate from a library. In some cases, libraries, you can just check out a hotspot or a laptop using a very similar mechanism. But sometimes they are loaned to organizations. So if you are an organization where you have clients who you know that you have elder clients who do not have access to the internet access, do not have access to the broadband that they need in order to be able to do their work with you or follow up on the things that you need them to, or they don't have an appropriate device to do that. Your library may be able to loan you a set that you could then distribute to your clients. Of course, the purpose here is to get people connected at home, not just in the library buildings. Some excellent partners here. So you can actually see in this photo, SHAG is a low-income senior housing community here in the Seattle area where I'm located. And this is actually one of our patrons checking out a hotspot that by partnering with senior facilities or places that serve seniors, especially homebound or mobility limited seniors, you can identify the folks who don't have this access or would most benefit from it, and then work to target getting that equipment into the hands of the people who really need it the most or would benefit from it the most. Next slide, please. And then the last one I'll talk about, this is something you are much less likely to see. This is a lot newer. It's a pretty cutting edge one, but it is something that is growing, and it speaks to the importance, as everyone is realizing, the increasing importance of not only providing community anchor points like libraries where people can go out and access the internet, recognizing that that is not sufficient any longer, that the internet is a utility and you need it in your home as much as you once needed a phone. You know, imagine if the only phone in your community was located in the library. That it's important to have these not just in community locations, but also to partner to try to get people access in their own homes so that they have that access, 24 hours a day. Community networks are a type of model that does this. They are community owned and operated high-speed wireless internet networks. This means they are generally free or extremely low cost to the members themselves. Essentially, a nonprofit forms, develops a partnership with a telecom company and puts up repeater antennas on places like senior facilities and libraries. And is actually, each of those antennas is able to provide a high-speed in-home wireless connection to about 90 households. These generally come together. These are not usually initiated either by libraries or by these initial, service provider nonprofits. It's often kind of a university and technology-oriented nonprofits coming together, and the whole community working together to train volunteers in the community who are using this network to maintain it, and providing the infrastructure for them to make autonomous decisions about it. So while this is less common, it is something that is an option, and especially if you have people who are clustered in a geographic area, who are in a particular housing community, for example, or even in a neighborhood. And this is something that you could seek out, that you could find, especially any local universities are really good partners here, that you could look for opportunities to encourage and participate in fledgling efforts around this in your community. Next slide, please. So just a few takeaways here, right? These are just some models that are growing. Libraries are already helping your clients right where they are, right? These are all things that are really happening in libraries around the country with partner organizations around the country. People are coming to their libraries when they have questions and problems, whether those are technology related or law related or social service related. And it is often the librarians who then help them understand what the underlying questions are and what the resources available to them are. So think of that library as your community's front door to your services. Next slide. It's also, I do want to highlight, when you partner with your library may not offer any of these services right now, right? It might offer one, it might offer several, there might be none. Libraries want to work with you to make new things. They want to respond to community needs. They have no agenda aside from getting people the access and the information they need. They want to put people in touch with you because you are the experts. So if there is something that appeals to you and that you think would be really helpful to your clients, and it does not exist in your community, go and talk to your library because they want to help you make it. Now is really the time to do that. And part of the reason that I want to highlight the timeliness of this is because of some new legislation. So IAJA, or IAJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, that big old infrastructure bill that we all heard so much about, there is a portion of that called DEA, the Digital Equity Act. And there is a significant amount of funding for work related to digital equity, whether that's broadband access, digital literacy, device access, all of those pieces. Significant funding that will be distributed first to states, but then also to individual organizations related to that. And that funding opportunity is starting right about now. What's happening in this upcoming year will be grants, planning grants to states. So states will be able to apply for funding to develop a digital equity plan for the state. And you want to be part of that plan. Because when the real money starts to come in the following year to implement the plan, you want issues of elder justice to be on the radar, to be funded. You want your organization to be represented, and you want the voice of the people and the issues that you represent to be part of that plan. So now is really the time to start talking and thinking about these issues, to reach out to your libraries, also to your legislators, to whatever office at your county or state is responsible for any kind of municipal broadband. A lot of times it lives under commerce. Now is the moment, because there's going to be a lot of funding and a lot of work done over the next 5 years. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Audrey. I think that was a really wonderful overview of digital equity and inclusion, and some really interesting partnership models in that space for our attendees to consider. And I think we all would just underscore that last point that Audrey made about the importance and this moment of opportunity for the elder justice community to be at the table, or to be seeking a seat at the table where these major investments are going to be made. So thank you. So I think we'll go to Brooke now, and then we'll continue to take questions, and we'll maybe come back to a few at the end. But I think Brooke will also be able to take us through here, I think, some really interesting examples and resources for partnership models, and actually operationalizing some of these contexts in the context of partnerships with public libraries.
Great. Thank you, Liz. I'm really glad to be with you today, to be included in this conversation, and I'll be talking about how libraries are access to justice partners. Next, please. I am Brooke Doyle from Junction, and we call ourselves the learning place for libraries. We launched in 2003, and we've helped more than 140,000 learners build their knowledge, skills, and confidence to deliver services to their communities. We offer free and open online learning network that connects library staff to the people, skills, and ideas that will help their libraries thrive. Our primary audience is US public libraries, but Junction is available to any library, anywhere, anytime. We are offering free professional development and continuous educational opportunities for library staff and volunteers at any stage of their career or any position. And our focus is on equipping library staff with those knowledge and skills and confidence to do their jobs. And the legal space is a great example of where we need to build up the skills and confidence. This is an area that can be intimidating to folks. Next, please. The Legal Services Corporation, LSC, looked to us when they were interested in trying to close the justice gap and finding more access points for legal information. Libraries seemed to make sense as a possibility, and Junction was the place to go to have a really wide reach nationally to public library staff. So we have partnered with them over the last several years to help equip libraries to play a role in access to justice. And we really did wonder if public libraries would be interested or if they would be too intimidated. Next, please. And I want to underscore that intimidation. Public library staff are typically not lawyers, and this is a really complex area. And many of you live in this space, and it may not feel, you may not appreciate the complexity and intimidation that it can be to a layperson. Like Liz talked about, that fear of crossing the line from information to advice is really drummed into library staff. And so many of them are just really wary of this whole space. And of course, the stakes of these interactions are often very high, and there's a lot of emotion involved. So this area can be really a difficult one. Next, please. So we've all talked about sort of the issue spotting, and the reference desk is a place that gets everything. There's all kinds of questions that come in the door. And for many of you who have legal training, you may see these and know, oh, there's definitely, legal issues potentially underneath there, and here are the questions I should ask to get to those. But a library staff that's not trained in these may not know that. And so that's part of what the learning needs to be, is how do you know what might be there, and what questions do you ask to get there? Next, please. So part of our project with LSC was to develop these courses. So we have 4 courses that, again, are free to help build these knowledge, skills, and confidence. They're self-paced, so it's a really nice way for people to kind of approach this at their own pace, and at the point at which it makes the most sense to enter, like maybe you need to really work on your legal reference skills. So for this audience, I would highlight course 3, which is really about partnerships, because you might be the person that some of our library staff taking that course are going to be calling and saying, hi, you know, what do you do? Would you want to talk to us about a partnership? So you could also, I will say, if you, as you're beginning to talk to libraries, you can tell them about these courses if they don't know about them. And that's a short URL that will get you to the right place. Next, please. I think we've hit a lot of these, but I will just do a quick review. So the reason that you would want to partner with libraries, we have the reliable technology, internet connection. We've got printers and faxes and phones, like all the old stuff and the new stuff, like we've got it. And we can provide some of those digital literacy pieces that Audrey was talking about. It's a familiar public space. It's not associated with you know, a courthouse or a place that might feel intimidating for folks who've had negative legal experiences. There's 16,000 libraries in the US, more than that. So we are in those little nooks and crannies of the US that you might be trying to reach. We have that established and trusted relationship with the community that you can benefit from. And we have the shared goal of providing resources to our communities. So I hope that is convincing you that libraries are a great partner in your work. Next, please. Some of this I can kind of go quickly through because we've touched on this. I want to give you today some different models for what a partnership might look like. So Audrey talked about sort of the telehealth model and how that can look, you know, sort of substitute the health for the legal. That model is fairly common, the lawyer in the library model. It can be, it's often done in person. So in the before times, that's all we did. Or a lot of what we did. So, you know, once a month or twice a month, you have volunteer attorneys coming or legal aid attorneys coming into the library to have a conversation. And this is for issues that need legal expertise, but don't need an ongoing relationship with an attorney. It's something that can be dealt with fairly quickly or in, you know, say 30, 45 minutes, or, you know, referred on to a longer term relationship. So that model is pretty common. And now during the pandemic, it forced people to do the pivot to remote, and it has been really, really successful. And people have realized, you know, there's the transportation barrier, you know, I can't get to the library, or I can't get to the library at the right time, you know, so that and some of these are just now done over the phone too, because the technology barrier has been too much. And so the phone is something that can work. So we have definitely seen the pivot to virtual. So sometimes there can be a more targeted lawyer in the library program. So we have an example in the resources that you'll see. A library in Maryland, the workforce development staff were seeing a lot of barriers to employment that patrons were experiencing because of a criminal record. And they asked their legal aid partners, you know, is there anything we can do about this? And they learned about the process of expungement. And that is something that some states, not all states, offer. And there's a process for doing that that's relatively straightforward, that could be sort of achieved during an appointment at a library. So they started doing an expungement process, and a lot of patrons didn't even know that was an option. So offering that and then helping remove barriers to employment was huge. I want to talk about the virtual pro se clinic in Colorado, because I think this is a really inspirational story of really scaling a lawyer in the library program. So Audrey, you know, mentioned the rural urban divide. So often we've got volunteer attorneys in urban areas, people with needs in rural areas, and how can we bridge that divide? And that often happens through technology. So Rick Morgan is a volunteer attorney in Colorado, and he really focuses on the most geographically diverse areas, which are profoundly impoverished and have very few free legal resources. And so he started small in these partnerships with these small communities, and finding the areas that needed legal help and finding the attorneys that he could connect to them. And he really has a great partnership model where he starts small, demonstrates success, and builds incrementally. And he also talks about how he cultivates partners. And he really starts with the stakeholders, starts with the judges and the court staff and the churches and the DA office, and asks, who are the key stakeholders in this community, and how can we make them feel invested in this process of having a legal clinic? And then he makes sure that he has those conversations, and then he continues to offer regular feedback. Here's how we've started clinic. Here's how many folks we served. Here are the issues that we're seeing, and continues to make sure that they're updated. And then they become incredible advocates for the program and then continue to grow it. He said some of his best advocates are people in the medical and housing communities. And he keeps those folks engaged and informed. He has many of his volunteers are retired attorneys and judges who want to give back to the community. So his virtual pro se clinics are monthly at 87 libraries in 40 counties across Colorado. And last October, they assisted their 10,000th clinic patron since 2013. So the scale is really remarkable. And that 10,000th client was an elderly person with a property issue high up in the Rocky Mountains. So just really inspiring. So there's some information about that in the resources, about all three of those models in the resources, if you're interested in learning more. Next slide, please. So now I want to zoom out a little bit and widen our scope a little bit around just sort of the lawyer and the library variations. Community courts hosted at the library can be really effective. This, as you know, many of you know, the community courts have been around since the early 90s, and they typically focus on nonviolent cases like shoplifting, graffiti, not things like murder or arson. The legally binding sentences that come from community courts usually include community service, as well as some commitment on the part of the defendant to get help, such as drug treatment or other health care. Community courts typically consist of two rooms, one where the judge holds the court, and the other which acts as a CRC, which is Community Resource Center, in which social service providers are present with tables around the room, offering different types of services like counseling, housing, public health workers, technical schools, community colleges, healthcare nonprofits, temporary agencies looking for workers. So the connotations of the library suggest opportunity and hope in a way a courthouse can't. So that's part of why this community model is really successful and really has a more optimistic feel to it. Spokane Public Library, which is pictured on the right there, they're in Eastern Washington. Their downtown branch has been hosting community court since December of 2013, and they see about 1,000 folks annually. King County system in Washington State, in the Seattle area, has CRC, so the Community Resource Center, with about 45 providers, so really extensive. And they're available to the general public coming to the library, as well as the defendants who are coming for community court. So you don't have to have a criminal charge. Twice as many people are accessing the library to get the services than those are charged. This model really appears to be a win-win. The court in King County has processed almost 100 cases, and only 4 of those defendants have had to return to the traditional court systems. One of the court representatives says community members are happy because they can get information, and the service providers are happy because they have a full house and they're getting, they're serving lots of folks those days. You can also just do a service point model. So Seattle Public Library goes to the Seattle Municipal Court a couple of times a week and provides assistance at the court, helping people register for library cards, waiving and lowering fines, providing reference service. So this can look a lot of different ways. If this whole model seems like a huge reach, you can start by just establishing a CRC, establishing a community resource center, bring down together the service providers, hold it at the library without the court element, and begin to have the service providers talk and see how this might be able to develop. Okay, next, please. So a different model is social workers in the library. You might have heard about this. The model has been around for about 10 years. San Francisco was the first place to do this, to hire a social worker.
I think we might have just... Brooke, I think your connection just dropped for a moment, but it sounds like we have you back.
I'm back. Okay.
Yeah.
Weird. Okay. Sorry about that. Libraries have always been a place for people to turn to for information, but often these challenges the patrons are presenting are increasingly beyond the scope of what they are trained for. And that's when social workers can come in and fill the gaps. They are trained to assess and intervene with mental health, substance abuse, basic needs, poverty-related needs. These collaborations obviously need really clear boundaries so that each partner is knowing what their area is, but they have been really successful. Social workers focus on building relationships, getting to know the community, building the trust, and they have these relationships with the community partners to do those really successful referrals. Libraries are really keenly aware of community needs and can often identify service gaps. They can talk to the social worker who's a staff person with them and talk about how they can better meet those needs. So this model is funded in different ways, and I encourage you to look at some of the links and the resources if you wanted to do a deeper dive and pursue this. But number one, your local library might have a social worker who could be helpful with vulnerable seniors. And number two, if it doesn't, you might consider talking to them about that and figuring out if you could advocate for that together. Next, please. So if I've convinced you to connect with your libraries, I want to help you actually figure out how to do that. So if you are a legal aid provider, you have knowledge, skills, and experience that the libraries can really benefit from. So go to your local library, introduce yourself, explain what legal aid does, what your agency does, and how libraries might, how your reference folks can make those really good connections. You can also help librarians understand legal issues. Like I was talking about that issue spotting. There might be a real spike in eviction in your area. So people are going to understand tenants' rights and where's the emergency rental support and what can we do about this? How can I, and some of those sort of issues are very time sensitive. So so libraries need to be able to respond quickly and they need to have that knowledge at their fingertips. So you might offer to do a tenants' rights workshop. Or maybe you know a lot about disaster preparation and your area is really prone to natural disasters. So you could do a workshop on that for patrons. You could do a lunch and learn with library staff to help them just begin to get to know each other. Next slide, please. And if I would say be bold, be the person who walks in and says, hi, I'm from Legal Aid. I'd love to talk to your reference staff. If it's a small library, anybody, they all do, there's not very many staff and they do lots and lots of jobs. So anybody you talk to would be fine. If it's a bigger system, you might want to talk to the reference folks and start with them. I do have Web Junction has produced a tip sheet about kind of how to make these connections, and you'll see that in the resources. Next, please. I think I'm done. So I hope that I've inspired you to consider libraries as a partner in this work. And I hope I've given you some really concrete examples that you might want to dive deeper into. And I would love to hear from you if you wanted to talk more about anything. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Brooke. I think that's a great overview with some really concrete and inspiring examples. And I think the cross-training on disaster issues is such a thoughtful idea, just given the often disproportionate impact on older adults that happens in disaster scenarios. And then, what we've seen with many systems that people need access to, like, for example, to file a FEMA claim, many of the systems having moved online post the 2017 disasters. And so it's that, again, that intersection between legal access and digital access, and where that additional support can make a real difference. So I think we have time probably for one or two questions. So I'm just going to maybe pose one to Audrey and then one to Brooke to wrap up. And Audrey, you underscored how this is an important moment for advocacy around digital inclusion initiatives and investments. And do you have any suggestions for resources where attendees can go to follow developments in this space and what's happening federally or on the state level?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the federal level, there's a new website launched by NTIA, not NDIA, which I talked about earlier. That's National Telecommunications. And the website is Broadband USA. I believe it's broadband.ntia.gov. And it's specifically about providing kind of policy updates around this. So that's a really great one-stop federal source or first stop. At the state or local level, whatever aspects of your municipality oversee broadband. So whether you have a particular office of broadband or if you have municipal internet in your county, which you might, even if it's not available to individuals, like your municipal buildings might be on it. Whoever is in charge of that, reach out to them.
Great, great, thank you. Excellent. Brooke, a question for you. You shared some really great advice and models for how elder serving organizations and legal nonprofits can approach public libraries to create collaborations. Do you have any suggestions for sustaining those collaborations after they're up and running? Any resources that you point to for that?
Sure, I can speak to that. I would say continue talking, especially as staff turns over, both at your shop and at the libraries, continue to, walk into the library, reintroduce yourself, figure out who's there now, drop off a new set of flyers. It's kind of like any other relationship, you need to continue to cultivate it. I really love the lunch and learn model. Everybody has to eat, so show up and, you can do it on Zoom if transport, you just want to be a little more efficient and not have to have the travel time, and just gather and say, what are you hearing at the desk? Here's the things that is coming into our shop a lot. We're seeing a huge spike in rental assistance problems. For example, the United Way in a lot of places helped with rental assistance applications. Make sure those connections are all happening. One thing I didn't say, and this is relevant to this question too, is libraries they want to be part of this conversation, so invite them to the table. So when you're being invited to that conversation about broadband, make sure the libraries are coming. That's when the libraries are probably likely to be at, but maybe it's more of a legal focus one. I went to some natural disaster meetings recently, and I got to be the library representative, and people were like, oh, I didn't realize how you could be so helpful. And all of a sudden we were the favorite person in the room. So it was really great to it's that kind of thing. Like, think about when a library might be able to be part of the conversation and bring them along. If you have a relationship and you feel like, okay, they're a trusted partner, I'm ready to introduce them to my contacts. Because a lot of times it's these networks that you're on the inside of and libraries are on the outside of, and they want to understand how those networks work and when should they be at the table.
Great, great. Well, thank you so much, Brooke and Audrey. Really appreciate your willingness to participate today and share your expertise on this topic. And thank you to everybody who joined us. Our contact information and some additional resources are in the slide deck that's uploaded to FeedLoop. So don't hesitate to reach out to us if we can be a resource in the future. And thank you again, Kathy.
All right, thank you, Liz and Audrey and Brooke. I'm 100% behind partnering with libraries, not just for legal aid and attorneys, but in Florida for other aging service providers, because as you know, they can go there, use the e-government computer and apply for SNAP benefits or other benefits. And so if the other aging providers also partner with them, then we're just able to help our clients and your clients much better. So thank you for being here. And I hope everybody will do just what Brooke said, is call up their library and go meet them and let them meet you.